We're going to talk to you about the most urgent thing that is on our mind, and what we suspect is the most urgent thing on the minds of those who will connect with us. We'll title this tape Planet Earth About to be Recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us. Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to survive or evacuate is to leave with us.
Hello?
Yes, I need to report an anonymous tip. Who do I talk to?
Okay. This is regarding what?
This is regarding a mass suicide, and I can give you the address.
20 years after their mass suicide made headlines around the world, Heaven's Gate is still one of the most notorious cults of the 20th century, not to mention one of the most recognizable. In March 1997, America was shocked by the strange story that included mass suicide, wild public access style videos, and an obsession with UFOs, and in true late 90s fashion, tracksuits and matching Nikes. They also had a new strange recruitment tool, the internet. Their website is still up till this very day. So what happened, and what was the hype all about? So let's talk about the leaders. This is Bonnie Nettles and this is Marshall Applewhite. They were the leaders who led their followers to their graves. Nettles and Applewhite first met in 1972 and went on a journey of spiritual discovery, identifying themselves as the two witnesses of revelation, attracting a following of several hundred people in the mid-1970s. Marshall Applewhite was a music professor who, after surviving a near-death experience in 1972, was recruited into the cult by one of his nurses, Bonnie Lou Nettles. Marshall Applewhite was born in 1931 and in Texas, and by most accounts had a very relatively normal life. Known for his musical talents, he once attempted to become an actor. When that didn't pan out, he pursued music-focused careers at universities, which appeared to be going well. But in 1970s, he was allegedly fired from his job as a music professor at Houston's University of St. Thomas because he was having a relationship with one of his male students. Though Applewhite and his wife were already divorced by that time, he struggled with the loss of his job and may have been having a nervous breakdown. A couple of years later, he met Bonnie Nettles, a nurse with a strong interest in the Bible, as well as a few obscure spiritual beliefs. As for his nurse, Bonnie Nettles, little is known about her past. How she met Applewhite is still subject to discussion. However, Applewhite's sister maintains that he entered a Houston hospital with heart troubles and that Nettles was one of the nurses who treated him. According to Applewhite's sister, Nettles convinced Applewhite that he had a purpose and that God had saved him for a reason. As for Applewhite himself, he declared that that is false, and he would say that he was simply visiting a friend in the hospital when he encountered Nettles. By 1973, they were convinced that they were the two witnesses described in the Christian book of Revelation, and they would prepare the way for the kingdom of heaven. It's unclear when they added UFOs and other elements of science fiction to their belief system, but this is what ultimately became a huge part of what they stood for. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles began to call themselves Bo and Peep, him and her, and Doe and Tea, as from the Sound of Music. Sometimes they went by Winnie and Pooh and Tiddly and Wink. They shared a platonic sexless partnership in keeping up with the life they would come to encourage among their followers. Now, once they put together their belief system, Applewhite and Nettles wasted no time advertising their new cult, preparing presentations for potential followers all over the country. Applewhite and Nettles would distribute posters that promoted a mixture of conspiracy theories and science fiction, and yet these invitations were undeniably eye-catching. The word UFO would often appear in big letters at the top, with a disclaimer at the bottom, not a discussion of UFO sightings or phenomena. The posters usually claimed two individuals say they were sent from the level above human and would return to the level in a spaceship UFO within the next few months. Now, by the 1975, they gave a particularly successful presentation in Oregon. In this presentation, Applewhite and Nettles promoted Heaven's Gate, then called Human Individual Metamorphosis or Total Overcomers Anonymous, with the promise that a spaceship would whisk their followers away to salvation. Applewhite and Nettles would persuade a group of 20 people from Oregon to abandon their family and possessions and move to eastern Colorado, where they promised that an extraterrestrial spaceship would take them to a kingdom of heaven. Before then, the followers had to renounce sex, drugs, and all their earthly possessions, and in most cases, they also abandoned their own families. Only then could they be elevated to a new world and a better life known as TELAH, which is the evolutionary level above human. Nettles, who called herself T, and Applewhite, who took the name Doe, as I stated earlier, explained that human bodies were merely containers that could be abandoned in favor of a higher physical existence. Strange, right? But not for the members, as an estimated 150 people attended the event in Oregon. While most locals thought it was a joke at first, at least a couple dozen people were interested enough to join the cult and say goodbye to their loved ones. Now, let's move on to the rules. They managed to convince their followers to follow them and travel with them for about 2 decades. But before long, some followers began to feel restricted by the cult's rules. As if abandoning their families wasn't enough, members were also expected to follow strict guidelines, including no sex, no human-level relationships, no socializing. A few members, included Applewhite, took the rule to an extreme by undergoing castration. The group initially attempted castration by having one of the members, a former nurse, perform the castration, but this initial attempt was very unsuccessful, almost resulted in the patient's death and caused at least one member to leave the group. Although they tried and it failed, they eventually did it, and 8 members voluntarily castrated themselves, including Applewhite. As if that wasn't enough, the followers were also expected to dress largely alike and conform to incredibly specific rules about the most mundane things. Everything was designed to be an exact duplicate. You were not to come up with, well, I'm going to make this pancakes this big. There was a mixture, a size, how long you cooked it on one side, how much the burner was on, how many a person got, how the syrup was poured onto it, everything. How they managed to recruit over 200 followers is still beyond me. However, an early crew said that the cult's message was appealing because they were talking to my Christian heritage but in a modern, updated way. For example, Heaven's Gate apparently taught that the Virgin Mary was impregnated after she was taken up in a spacecraft. Now, as unbelievable as that sounds, that was an answer that was better than just plain Virgin Mary. It was technical, it had physicality to it. But before long, the cult's belief system became progressively wackier, which would eventually lead to disaster. One of the cult's major problems was that it was operating on a clock. Followers believed that if they stayed on Earth long enough, they would face recycling. The destruction of the Earth as a planet was wiped clean. At first, Nettles and Applewhite were convinced it wouldn't come to that. After all, a spaceship run by TELAH beings was supposed to arrive for them long before the apocalypse happened. Fate, however, threw a wrench in their plans when Nettles died from cancer in 1985. Her death was a severe blow to Applewhite, not only emotionally but also philosophically. Nettles' death had the potential to call into question a number of the cult's teaching. Perhaps most pressingly, why did she die before the TELAH beings came to pick the followers up? It was then Applewhite began to rely very heavily on one particular tenet of the cult's belief. Human bodies were merely vessels or vehicles that were carrying them on their journey, and these vehicles could be abandoned when humans were ready to ascend to the next level. According to Applewhite, Nettles had merely exited her vehicle and entered her new home among the TELAH beings. But Applewhite apparently still had work to do on this planet of existence, so he would guide his followers in the hopes that they would be reunited with Nettles once again. Members of the Heaven's Gate believed that suicide was wrong, but their definition of suicide was far different from the traditional one. They believed that the true meaning of suicide was turning against the next level when it was offered to them. Tragically, this fatal offer was made in March 1997. It's not clear where Applewhite got the idea that there was a UFO trailing behind Hale-Bopp comet, the brilliant comet that was about to make an appearance during that time, but he couldn't let this idea go. For some reason, Applewhite saw it as a sign. According to him, it was the only way to evacuate this Earth. The spaceship behind Hale-Bopp was apparently the flight that the Heaven's Gate members had been waiting for all along. It was coming to take them to the higher place they were seeking, and it was coming just in time. If they waited any longer, Applewhite was convinced that the Earth was going to be recycled while they were still on it. The 39 active Heaven's Gate cult members had already used the money they made for designing web pages, the cult's primary source of income, to rent a mansion near San Diego, and so they decided this mansion would be the place where they left their vehicles. Starting on March 22 or March 23, the 39 cult members ate applesauce or pudding that has been laced with heavy doses of barbiturates. Some washed it down with vodka. They did it group by group, placing bags over their heads to ensure asphyxiation, and then they waited for death. This was believed to have happened over the course of a few days. Those later in the lineup cleared up the mess made by the first group and laid the bodies out neatly, covering them with purple shrouds. Applewhite was the 37th member to die, leaving behind 2 others to prepare his corpse, and alone in a house full of bodies take their own lives as well. After the authorities were alerted via an anonymous tip on March 26, they found 39 bodies lying neatly in bunk beds and other resting places, dressed in identical black tracksuits and Nike sneakers and covered in purple shrouds. Their matching armbands read Heaven's Gate Away Team. Of course, the aftermath of the discovery was chaotic. Reporters swarmed the scene, clamoring for details about the suicide cult. Family members of the victims demanded that their bodies be tested for HIV. All of them were negative, and Marshall Applewhite's image was plastered on countless magazines, his wide-eyed facial expressions living on in infamy. And eerily enough, Heaven's Gate still has 4 living followers who survived only because they were instructed to run the group's website in the mid-1990s, and have been doing so ever since. They still believed in the cult's teachings, and they claim to be in contact with the 39 members who died. Their website still runs till this very day and denounces suicide, but emails can still be sent to inquire about the cult. There is an amazing in-depth documentary on HBO Max if you want more details about the accounts from ex-members called Heaven's Gate, the cult of cults. But please let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!